stand and salute the flag, which is over in this corner of the room.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There are agendas in the front of the room on pink paper. If we don't have them all, and I think the superintendent has pretty much of them. And there's an attendance sheet going around. And if you please print your name and your town, that will be a big help to the clerk. And please do not walk off with a piece of paper, which apparently happened last time. Thank you. Dr. Rouse, would you give the notice of posting, please?
This notice was posted on our website, at the SAU office, at each of our schools, and sent to each of our towns for posting.
Thank you. We would like to recognize two students tonight. I know that one of them is here. Mr. O'Malley, do you know if the young lady is going to be here?
She said she would attempt to be.
Okay.
Don't know if she's here. I know Dylan has practice.
Well, Dylan is here, I believe.
There he is. Hi, Dylan. Glad to get done in time.
Dylan Collins, if you'd like to come forward, we want to recognize Dylan for being named a National Merit Finalist. And we're very proud of you. Congratulations. You are a senior.
Yes.
And what are your plans for next year?
I'm planning on going to Northeastern University.
Excellent. You major?
Computer science.
Wonderful. You're wonderful. That's a great field to be in. And some of you may know that Dylan came to first deliberative special session and spoke, so you were very articulate, and we were very proud of you. Thank you very much.
Mr.
Congratulations.
Mr. O'Malley has
Just a little bit more background. The steps in the National Merit Scholarship Program are numerous, and they extend over about 18 months of time. And what happens is that out of the 1.5 million, 1,500,000 high school students who took the PSAT in October 2010 and met other program participation requirements, after they did that, they entered the National Merit Program Recognition and Scholarship action. Then that number was culled to 50,000 high scorers from 1.5 million. High-scoring participants from every state were offered the College Plans reporting service, and they were invited to put that status on their transcripts for college. Of the 50,000 then, there was another call to 34,000 from the 1.5 million, and these were commended students. We have another commended student at Newfound Regional who we hope would join us tonight, and that is Carly, and she couldn't make it, unfortunately. After the 34,000 then, 16,000 are named semi-finalists. Once more, they go through a screening, and from the 16,000 semi-finalists, 15,000 are actually finalists, and Dylan is one of those 15,000 from 1.5 million. The idea being that of the finalists, which there are 15,000, 8,300 will receive merit scholarships. So we're very hopeful that Dylan has better than a 50 chance, and he will be one of those scholarship recipients. And in recognition of that, we have this framed National Merit Scholarship Program Certificate of Merit for you, Dylan, saying that it is awarded to you as you have advanced to finalist standing in the National Merit Scholarship Program 2012 by demonstrating through distinguished performance high potential for future academic accomplishment. That's my vote.
Mr. O'Malley, would you give those to Carly?
Absolutely.
Okay, the board has in its packet minutes from 2 different meetings, and tonight you were given minutes at the table. The first meeting is January 9th. That was your regular business meeting last January. Are there corrections, omissions? There are a few seats over here if you'd like to sit down. In the front, the second row, third row. There are pink agendas in the front, and we ask that everyone sign the attendance to help the clerk. Thank you. No corrections? This must be a first. I was just going to say that. Either that or you didn't read them. If not, I'll entertain a motion for their approval as presented. January 9th, right, the regular business meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Okay, then you also have the minutes of the budget hearing, which was January 11th. Are there corrections, omissions to these minutes? Mr. Migliore?
On page 4, line
198, I believe that name should read William Corbeil, C-O-R-B-E-I-L. I know it's not cornmeal. I think it's B-E-I-L.
Yes.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
And then same thing on page 5, line 245. I believe that's Margaret LaBerge, L-A-B-E-R-G.
G-E, E at the end, I think.
Oh, okay. I knew it wasn't as written.
Anything else?
I don't know if it's L-E.
It's hard to get names of the
Yep.
public. And she sits with her back to the audience. I think it was a little better at first deliberative session. Are there any other comments?
Oh, I see one, line 230 on
What
the
page?
on the same page, page 5. Autumn, that should be Doan, I think, D-O-A-N. Right?
Yes. Doan, D-O-A-N.
D-O-A-N. No, I don't think so.
D-O-A-N-E?
I believe so. I think it's without an E, yeah. Without? We got 2 votes for without, 3 votes?
Anything else? Mr. Leoto?
If you're going to move on to the minutes that were just handed out for the 16th,
As soon as I finish these minutes. I'm asking if there is anything else on the January 11th budget hearing minutes.
I already approved them in my head.
Oh, well, would you like to move to approve as amended?
I would.
Thank you. Is there a second? All those in favor of approving as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Okay, now there are minutes at the table from the January 16th meeting. Mr. Leoto.
I just wanted to comment that I, for a variety of reasons, was unable to edit these, and so they are completely unedited, and I would, if it pleases the board, defer their approval to our next meeting, so I have a chance to look them over and edit them.
I know that Mr. Migliore sent his URLs in, but they are not on these minutes.
Right.
I was not at the meeting, so.
In addition to that, Mary, I noted that it appears to be incomplete. It goes from line 50 to 101. And if you read line 50 and then 101, it doesn't make sense.
Okay. So we'll get a corrected set of minutes in the next packet, and it will include Mr. Migliore's URLs. I know that he emailed them because I was copied on it. Under announcements, correspondence, and reports, Jo-
Did we need to have a second?
no, it's going to be, we're going to wait until the March meeting. Josh, would you like to give a report for the high school?
Sure.
I guess.
With, in the past month, since our last meeting, just a couple of highlights from the school and student council especially. We are in the process of putting on the annual winter carnival that goes on in the high school for council. That's coming along well. Various service projects are continued to be being enacted by certain advisory groups, part of the Pay It Forward that was addressed in the last council report. It's been fairly low volume. Nothing really massive has happened. In a new quarter, that's really all there is for the council report.
I would like to congratulate Josh that he was selected as the Rotary Speech Contest winner for this year, and did you go on to the second round yet?
And that is at the end of the month.
At the end of the month?
Yes.
So he has already won $100 from the local club. He will then go and compete with some students from, I think, Lebanon, Lincoln
Yes.
area. And then if he is successful at that level, he would be awarded $150. The next round is $250 and then $500 for the final round. So we wish Joshua luck. He did a nice essay about the four-way test. Service above self is the theme.
A little bit of both, yeah.
And a little bit of both. In the four-way test about, well, you can say a little bit if you wish
Yeah,
to.
it's right in here. Just highlighting the importance of honesty and taking really basic steps in order to ensure the benefit for all party involved, all parties involved. It's really just the highlights of it.
It's nice to have students in the high school emulating and following the role models that are set forth from some very diligent servants in the community. And Josh is also going to be working on setting up a junior Rotary, which is called Interact, at the high school level. And the Lions Club has a level called the Leos Club at the high school. So we have a lot of service going on and connecting with our community service organizations. So thanks for taking the time to write your essay and performing it.
Congratulations, Josh, and good luck with the next competition. You also have in your board packet on purple paper all the reports from the principals, and under Bridgewater Hebron Village School, I was thrilled to see that Val Keogh has received a grant of over $5,000 to do the Ready for Kindergarten program. Remember, Shavana, this is the same one that she already explained to us?
This is a new
Or
one.
is it new?
Yes.
Okay.
The one that Val talked to us this summer was a mini grant that she received to work with students who were pre-kindergarten level who were coming in after screening in the springtime
Right.
with their skills below level. Ready for Kindergarten is an entirely grant-funded program with matching funds from the NEF, the Newfound Education Endowment Foundation, and that will bring parents to 3 trainings per year, and they will come and they will learn about what are the kind of skills and benchmarks that a student, a pre-student, a child at age 1 should be able to know, like which colors, which sounds, which numbers should a 3-year-old know if they are to be on track to be ready for kindergarten. So it's another one of our Birth to 5 initiatives to help to have students walk in the door ready to learn and ready to achieve.
Wonderful.
So it's yet another initiative.
And also that Doug Riddle, who's been a volunteer in schools for many, many years, was honored on his 85th birthday, and that the Bridgewater Hebron Village District, one of our commissioners is in the back of the room, allowed the library to be named in honor of Douglas Amu Riddle. Amu is his nickname with children. Danbury, it said that their silhouette performance in front of the whole staff was just outstanding. Do you have any comments, Dr. Ross, about
It moved
this?
the entire staff of we always have a district meeting, a mid-year update, and every teacher, every support staff was moved to tears. the students in Danbury had 3 sheets that were attached, and they were strung on like a wire, and they formed letters, words, their mission statement. They danced as shadows and silhouettes behind the sheets. It was precious. And then the 5th grade at the New Hampton school sang "We Are the World," I think was the first song that they sang. And I know Lou went to their concert when they did the whole school concert for New Hampton.
Yep.
And got to hear it as well. So, and moved us to tears again. It was precious.
And then I'll just finish and then call on you, Mr. Lieto. The middle school, the math meet that Newfound came in 4th out of 10 schools?
10.
10 schools. So the middle school, that's grades 7 and 8, had a math meet, and we came in 4th out of 10. And the high school math team for the Lakes Region schools came in 1st, and they're moving on to the state meet. And Carla Heward, who we were going to recognize tonight, was the high scorer in this league. I have some question for Mr. Rossner, but I'll do that later. Mr. Leda?
I was going to mention the 2 math competitions.
Mr. McLeary?
Yes. In the interest of fairness, I guess, I find it odd that our math team did so extremely well, which I'm quite proud of to hear, but our ranking in the data task force was 2nd worst in math.
Well, remember your date is 2 years old.
Correct.
3 now.
I want to point out that there are anomalies in how we make decisions based on facts. That's evidence.
Are there other comments from board members about the principal's report? I have a couple of questions about Mr. Rossman's report, just the data that you gave us. First of all, I'm very pleased that all 7 towns have paid their January, and I see from the report of receipts everyone is up to date, and I appreciate that. Carol Exford resigning at the end of the school year for Newfound Food Service. So you're going to be looking for a candidate, and hopefully there'll be a little overlap.
Yes, she's retiring. She went, she took a step back from full-time to part-time 3 years ago and has decided to go into full-fledged retirement. So that'll present a challenge for us in terms of finding a qualified candidate, bringing them up to speed on the facets of food service in this district, the different schools, and also it may present a budgetary challenge, I believe, but we'll figure it out.
Okay. Your item number 5 about TD Bank paying a fee for charging employees to cash their paycheck. I didn't quite understand that you've notified the employees. The part I didn't understand was provide some alternative solutions for them.
Well, currently our operating account and our payroll account are 2 separate bank accounts, but they're both at TD Bank. TD Bank has a new policy that they've implemented system-wide. Anyone who cashes a check without an account at that bank will be charged a $5 fee. I tried to get that waived. I pushed it as far up the channels as I could, and it was rejected. So one alternative may be, and I haven't explored this prior to discussing it with you, one alternative may be to open a second bank account in a local bank that would be the payroll account, and simply transfer the funds from, instead of it going from one account to another both within TD Bank, you could transfer funds to a payroll account at a separate bank that may not impose those charges on our employees, because not all of our employees have bank accounts.
Right.
And so if the board so wishes, I'd explore those and report back on my findings prior to making any decisions.
Now that I understand it, I would certainly appreciate you exploring it, but I'm only one board member. I see a couple of heads nodding, though. And number 6, about buying pizza for our lunchrooms from local restaurants. That sounds like a great idea. If they're going to meet the healthy requirements, and Carol's talked about it.
We've had a number of local vendors, local operations have come to the school district and said, you know, we'd really like to be able to supply. For example, we know the kids like pizza. We'd like to be able to supply it if we can meet the nutritional requirements, if we come up with a cost structure that makes sense for the district. and gives us additional business. Would you be open to that? And I said, it's an interesting idea. And unless the school board says absolutely not, we'll move forward and come up with a pricing notification strategy. It could be something where people would sign up in the morning where they're going to buy hot lunch, and then we just call the orders in so we're not overbuying.
Right.
They would price it appropriately so we can meet our cost constraints, and I think we might have greater participation. Carol, expert, has reviewed with the 2 vendors we've talked with so far about potentially doing it. We've tried to spread it out, the business around the towns, not just give it all to one vendor, even though that's what they've pushed for. She has spoken with them about the requirements for the tomato sauce, sugar content, cheese, things like that.
Wonderful. Great. So give us an update.
I will.
And just, I wanted to add one more.
Can I add one? I'm sorry, can you update one other thing on my report?
Sure.
I had mentioned that I was seeking to get the facilities committee, the educational facilities subcommittee of the board together, and we did do that at the end of last week. So there's no need to schedule anything, and I didn't type minutes for it because it was a fairly informal meeting, but we had some good progress.
Good. And thank you to Josh Malloy for all of the networking change that he did. In your,
I had a question.
Sure.
For Dan.
About the carpet at the high school. We decided to go with the carpet as it
We decided to
exists.
stay with carpeting in the hallway. That we're replacing the floor covering in one section of one hallway in this building. We had talked about potentially going to vinyl tile.
Right.
We found a carpeting product that we're very enthusiastic about, among other things. It's got a 25-year warranty, including wear, by the way, which is, I wasn't sure about the wear. We knew that the 25-year warranty included labor for installation and other things, but it includes wear as well. It's got a fairly unusual construction that prevents the mold issue, and also as well as the buckling issue that that occurs when the carpets are shampooed. So I feel very comfortable with the product. It'll come in within our budgetary constraints, and I think it'll just be a good improvement to the building. And that was the primary point of our discussion with Mr. Belvin and Mr. Reinhardt last week.
Yeah. It probably absorbs more noise than the vinyl.
Absolutely absorbs more noise. It's a cushion product, but it's fully adhered. It's not like typical carpets that are put down with a mastic or secured in place with a runner board.
Right.
And it also has an impermeable backing so that the 25-year warranty includes moisture saturation, so that if you do shampoo them in the summers, which typically you'd want to shampoo the new carpets in the winter so that the heat system is on and they'll dry out, avoid the whole mold issue. But if you do shampoo in the summer, which is when more maintenance projects take place, there's a 25-year guarantee, including on the moisture penetration through the backing. So I can provide you samples if you want to see it, but right now we just have color samples at the high school so that they can
Sounds like I should have it in my house.
talk about the colors.
Good.
And also in your packet was the usual Newfound Regional High School monthly newsletter, and inside there was a couple of pictures and an article about Art ELO success. And we've heard about ELOs. They are extended learning opportunities that are here in the high school for students to do something outside of the classroom, but usually with an adult mentor. And we have a lot of community people who come in to be mentors or work with our students. And this is about how 3 of our students illustrated a book that Pam Yinger, who lives in Groton, had authored. I was very fortunate to attend the luncheon and receive one of the signed books that she was signing for everybody. So it's a wonderful experience. She was thrilled. The students were, by the editors of the book, were very complimented on all of the illustrations that they did for the story. And Pam Yinger has written other children's books. She's a former school teacher, former librarian for the town of Groton, and she was just delighted to work with these young ladies and delighted with their work. So I wanted to be able to share this with people.
Mary, may I say something about the article? You received in your packet an article, and very tiny letters under the caption said, that the author was from Education Week. This is a nationally published, internationally published weekly. So the fact that they chose to highlight Newfound Regional High School was quite an honor. And I hope you got a chance to read that, and if you haven't, and I'm sure Mike will highlight a couple of things in there. But this was all about anywhere, anytime learning and how students can opt to meet their competencies through real-world learning experiences. And it highlights one of our students who's 17 years old and a senior, and she is currently working together with the Humane Society. And she is accomplishing her English credits through that. She's benefiting them, they're benefiting her, and she's going to walk out of here with some real rich experience. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, this came off the internet before the weekly magazine came out. This is the February 8th, volume 31 edition of the National Newspaper Education Week. And that article that you have is this article on the front page, New Hampshire Schools Focus on Competency. And the article, if you have read it or if you get a chance to, will duplicate that is in here on page 16, which is the story of Newfound Regional High School. So that's the publication it was put in.
Thank you. On your agenda is a report from the New Hampshire School Boards Association Delegate Assembly. Mr. Migliori is our delegate, and he did attend the annual meeting on January 14th. He very kindly emailed to us this weekend a copy of his report. Do you have questions for Mr. Migliori? Mr. Migliori, do you wish to make any brief statements? I appreciate you going, and it was a very informative report.
Just for the record, I don't want to go through the whole report. There's a lot going on in education. You can find that out by reviewing the notes, and perhaps the most important thing, I think, is the hot topic session and the labor relations focus on the new law. And I'm kind of looking for input perhaps from the superintendent and or Mary, if you're aware, with respect to where we stand in our collective bargaining agreement with respect to a severability clause, because that was presented, that was the issue, I think, that was presented by an attorney who is also a member of a school board in the southwestern part of New Hampshire. I forget exactly where, but Kathleen Pearl made it real clear that this law is going to be tested for its constitutionality, apparently, and it puts boards in a dilemma as to whether or not we follow the law or follow the collective bargaining agreement, which may be forcing us to break the law if we don't have a severability clause. So I just wanted to point that out with emphasis for the board's knowledge, since we are likely to do some riffing, and her creative solution was to double riff in preparation for only needing to fund half of the double rift individuals.
We think that we're in really good shape with the law in our current agreement. Our agreement, basically the only language in our agreement says that any reduction in force will be accomplished through policy GCPA. And our policy doesn't, the law basically says you cannot use seniority as your only measure. And our policy, as you know, because we just updated it, is very comprehensive and said that the most effective teachers would be retained, and we would look at several items including job performance, overall effectiveness, and that seniority, academic preparation, amount of schooling that the teacher had had. So at the end it says, all things being equal, then seniority would be the tiebreaker. So when we updated our policy recently that you just passed for first and then second reading, the only change we made to that was the classifications. They used to be odd numbers like K through 3 and 4 through 6 and 7 through 9 and 10 through 12, which were not our current configurations. So when we made those changes, our union contract does state that that policy cannot be changed at all during the terms of the contract. And yet, we had to update it because the law changed the tenure year from 3 years of service before you become a permanent tenured teacher rather than probationary, and the law changed that to 5 years. So we have a letter signed by the president of the Newfoundland Area Teachers Association that she was in total agreement with the changes that you as the board made. So I think we're in excellent standing, we're in agreement with the law, and I don't see that we're going to have an issue for that reason.
And for the record, do we have a severability clause in our collective bargaining agreement?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't think so either.
Don't we have a statement, I believe in that policy, which says that any change in the law is that we are required to follow is automatically implemented?
I don't believe that's, I don't have my,
Yeah, neither do I.
My,
I thought we did.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't think so either.
But the law does override.
The law supersedes policy, right.
Except that the attorney's point was, and this was what I was concerned about, if we have a contractual agreement, and then, by the way, because the contract expired, or it expires July 1st, correct, or June 30th, perhaps we don't have a contractual agreement anymore. I don't know. But assuming we do, and it does not have a severability clause in it, which basically states anything in here that's contrary to state law is agreed that it will be null and void, then the collective bargaining agreement members can, on the basis of contractual law, say that we are breaking the agreement. So the dilemma is that without that in the agreement, we may have that issue. And I just raise it so that it's high enough up that when we do this, we consider that.
So when we renegotiate, then we can look into adding that clause in the future, but I don't foresee, obviously, there's going to be an incredibly difficult process that we will have to undertake because we do have a reduction in force of 15.4 teaching positions, and we only have three retirements so far, I think a fourth one unofficially. So we definitely will have to be very cautious in how we do that. So we've called in a consultant who has been working on the national scene for teacher effectiveness, and she's going to be meeting with all of our principals to come up with some decision-making rules and what data would we look at to discuss effectiveness, et cetera. So we need to be extremely cautious in how we do this. It's going to be extremely difficult, and we're going to be very careful about how we do it.
Thank you. Any other comments about Mr. Migliore's report? Sue?
Well, I noticed here where it says, of 34 countries measured, Mexico, Brazil, and Turkey are ahead of the USA in academic results, but we spend the most money per student than any country except maybe Switzerland. Well, I remember one time we were compared to another country, I think it was India, and that their results were better than ours, but it turned out that only about 10% of the children got to actually attend school, and it would have been the most, the smartest 10%. So we were being compared maybe a little unfairly. So I was kind of wondering whether all the children go to school in these countries. We probably don't know that, but it's something to think about.
We do know that with respect to Mexico, absolutely.
That all the children go to
No,
school?
we know that they do not.
Do not.
The country, in fact, all of the people who live there, who were born there and whose ancestors were born there, they're not all citizens, because there are arcane laws in different sections with respect to the legitimacy of offspring as to whether or not you're married and these other things, which exclude you from citizenship. So I find it extremely humorous that one would choose Mexico as a comparison. Not to say that we can't do better. I'm not arguing that at all. I just think that the case is not helped by the examples given.
To put the comments in context, these were made by House Speaker Bill O'Brien as part of his introductory remarks. And I might add, he was severely chastised by one of the members in the delegation for politicizing, in her opinion, some of the things he did say. So it didn't go unnoticed. This was not the area, but
Right.
I wanted to turn around and see who that woman was, 'cause I wanted to vote for her.
But thank you again, Principal. All right, under strategic plan reports, under core, the first topic is the kneecap test results. Mr. Chase had his presentation ready, but he fell on the ice yesterday. I know you're going to do it. I just wanted to give credit to Mr. Chase because he's the data guy, to putting the presentation together. But I understand that yesterday he fell on the ice in his yard and in his driveway, and he has broken ribs. So he's on some medication that probably he should stay home with the medication, but Dr. Ross has the presentation, and she will now present it. Thank you.
Actually, Mr. O'Malley is going to present the 11th grade results first, because he's already wired, and then I will present the grade 3 through 8 results.
Mr. O'Malley, I never knew you were wired. I never thought of you that way, although that's a handsome tie.
Thank you very much. That's one for everybody. I think the first slide that I have tonight is the following from the state. And it's not, I wanted everybody to have it because of, it's as comprehensive as it gets for one page, but I will go through the information with a series of other slides that highlight.
For anyone who's in the audience that doesn't know what NECAP stands for, it is the New England Common Assessment Program. I know we have the new reporter for the Record Enterprise. Thank you for joining us. We tend to say it every year, and we think that people know what we're talking about. So, New England Common Assessment Program would include the states of Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine is joining us at the 3 through 8 level, but not the grade 11. And this is our No Child Left Behind accountability test that's issued to all of our students in grades 3 through 8 and 11 during the weeks of the 1st of October through to the end of the month.
I'll try to stay out of everybody's way, but the reason I mentioned giving you this sheet to look at, so you can refer back to it on the board if you so choose. The results are here in reading, and so by school, which is us, district, which is the same because we're a one-district high school, these numbers will be identical. And then the comparison that the summary report makes is to the state. The state reports its scores in the same categories, level 4, 3, 2, and 1. And the state data for comparisons uses a mean scale score between 1120 and 1180. That's how you can score. So for example, if you're looking at the reading scores this year for the high school, and you look at its mean scale score of 1149, you will see that the state mean scale score is 1148, so that as a school, we scored above the mean for the state. If you look at the math results, the mean scale score for Newfound was 1136, and the state mean was 1136. We're at the mean for math, according to the state data as they report it by comparisons for reading, math, and in writing. It's a little bit different. Instead of the 1120 to the 1180 score, they're scoring it 5 to 10. 6.5 is our mean score. The state mean is 6.2. So you might ask, well, how does the mean score get developed? It's by the combination of the scoring for levels 4, 3, 2, and 1, barely, because 1 is substantially below proficient. 2 is partially proficient. 3 is proficient. And 4 is proficient with distinction. So if we begin with the reading scores of Newfound Regional High School, as the 11th grade tested in October of last year, 31% of our kids who tested proficient with distinction. In the state, that level was 30%. In reading in level 3 proficient, 52% of Newfound's tested class last year tested proficient. In the state, that level is 47%. 13% were in level 2 partially proficient, and 4% were below that. That amounts to 3 students. So 83% of those tested last year in reading at the high school were proficient or above. And that's why the mean scale score is above the mean for the state, 1149 to 1148. So some of the data that you have on that first summary sheet is recorded here in different references. In this chart, it's the reading mean score. Again, you can see that last year we did not have a very good testing year. We were higher the year before, but this year at 1149, that represents the 83% proficient or above in reading. So that if you're looking at a comparison on the bar graph across 5 years, here's the difference this year in our testing from last year. Significantly different. 1149, I just pointed out that mean scale score is above the state mean. I'm going to go through some other data about reading, but before I do, you know we're all interested in math. So again, this data represented on these graphs in math show that in 2010 we were below the mean, and we scored this year at the mean. This is the improvement. This is the 5 previous years in math where we were on our way to where we wanted to be, and then didn't get there last year. We're back to at least the mean, and we want to go above that, obviously. Differences in the state between the testing in reading and in math is significant. Those scoring in the substantially above proficient category in math for this state represent 2% of those who are tested, 2% only. In our writing scores, we are again above the mean, this being Newfound, this being the state. Here are our scores over the last 5 years. Again, we were headed in the right direction, defaulted a little bit last year, and now we're back to, again, improvement. 6.5% was the mean for Newfound, 6.2 for the state. In writing, we had 55% of our students at level 3 proficient in writing, another 33% partially proficient. So now I want to go back to the reading proficiencies for the last 5 years. And what these levels show again are the levels I just went through, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Level 4 is the highest. Level 1 is basic. So this represents the third of the kids who tested with distinction in reading this year. 52% are proficient. We have 13% partially proficient. And 3 kids who are not there yet is partially proficient in reading. So we've been growing this over the last 4 years in relation to the percentage of our students performing with distinction. We want to narrow this statistic of 64 who were proficient because we want to move them into the distinction category in reading. We're doing that a little bit. You mentioned a comparison from the data task force. I don't know if you're using the mean scale score when you mentioned near the bottom. You might be using a different other score than the mean scale score.
We're using what's on the, the state ed
Okay.
website. I think that's the mean scale score.
I think it is. Well, you're holding the state data. This is what everybody has. That's why I gave you the summary page. And for our testing in 2011, this school year, here we are again in reading. That's the 31% with distinction I just mentioned. Here are the 52% are proficient. And here are some comparisons across the data task force in reading. In the middle of all these slides that are comparative, I have the average and the state. And again, it's calibrated by the 4 levels in 4 different colors. We are about 1 basis point in the mean scale score below the 2 schools ahead of us in this comparison for reading, which would be these here at 1150. Here we are. Here's the state average. And here are some other schools we've been compared to. This data is, again, this year's data. Same data you've seen, but these are some comparisons across our neighborhood, the Lakes region. Not the schools in the task force, but our neighbors. Again, we have some schools performing a little bit better than we are, but when you look at the number of kids reading as proficient with distinction in combination with proficiency at 83%, that is not near the bottom or anywhere near it in the Lakes region, as you can see. And you can see why. In fact, it's the opposite. Mean scale scores in reading reflect the same thing in a different chart, shown the same way, if you need to make a comparison. This is also what we consider important because we spent a year looking at our gap between those who are our special education students and how they're scoring and our regular education students, and we worked to close that gap. Overall in reading then you can see that this represents the number I've been talking about for a while, the 83%. In students with IEPs, as measured against the state mean, these kids last fall scored better than the state mean, higher for special education students, and 72% of the kids who were socioeconomically challenged, that subgroup is represented here in the state and here for Newfound, 72%. So as we broke out those, and which incidentally AYP is measured by that breakout, not just the overall, we expect quite a difference in our AYP performance. We've been looking for that, and we think we'll see it in the subcategories as well in reading. Yes, Luke?
The overall includes all of those special populations, is that correct? Do you have a breakout for the students who are not in the IEP category?
For SES kids or for overall?
Well,
Taking that portion out, no, I don't. But we only had 8 special education students tested.
Okay.
That's all there were in that 11th grade class.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's get to math. Our math story is different, as is the trend in the state. It is relative, but I don't want to stick with relative, because to make the argument that everybody's doing poorly so we can too is ludicrous. We won't go there. We don't want to do that. We're not doing that. But if you're only looking at the proficient number, remember this number here at the top represents level 4. So 2% of the state is at that level overall in the state. 2% of the kids who took the test. 98% of the kids don't score in that category on this test, which is not an easy test. Right now, we only had 25% of our kids scoring proficient, which is not where we want to be at all. But we had another 37% of our kids who are partially proficient, and half of those, if you look at the breakout of their released items, are 1 or 2 questions away from being proficient. We are at least noting the trend that we're looking for in the personalization of this math program, which is here for all kids. You see this? 55%, 47, 44, 38. That's the number we're pulling out of the bottom. Is it a big bottom? It's way too big. But our goal is for all students to reach proficiency, and we're pulling kids from this is substantially below proficient up into the partially proficient, and we need to get these kids over that hump into the proficient category. So that's where our focus is, that's where our strategy is, and that's where our tactics apply. So here's the kneecap data for math against the state average. Overall, here's the state, here we are at 25%. But 35% proficient is the state average. Not above 40, it's not above 50. Because the state's struggling to accommodate this test in all of its schools. However, in those 8 kids tested in our IEP, with IEPs, here is the state average, struggling even more. And we have struggled in this area, and we did not in this testing year. School need improvement plan that we have for the subgroup, special education, has improved their performance significantly. Here is the state average for SES, social economically challenged, and here is ours. And this is math, just math again. So here we have some more comparisons once more. And at our 25%, you can see that there are those in this group lower than that and higher than that. One school equal to the partially proficient, which is the boundary that we're pushing kids into and out from into the proficiency. And that was at Winnisquam. But if you're using the mean scale scores for this comparison, this is the standing. So if we're going to use a different other score to project the idea of the anomaly being that we're near the bottom, I got to know what that is so we can target that for improvement, because according to the state data with the mean scale score, in relation to these schools, we are not at the bottom. Again, relative because of where we are that we don't want to be, yes. So that's just how it plotted out. So here it is again. Mean scale scores over this comparison. And again, some of the higher performing schools than we were at the mean are about a basis point or 2 above the mean. Because again, everybody's working hard to get this math program right with the testing. In the Lakes region, again, the neighborhood, not the comparison task force, but other findings have us here, the 37-25 combination. This is way too high. We have to work diligently to get that to be lower. Concord High School has 39% of its students in the bottom. Substantially below proficient. Again, according to the state's data with the mean, here we are. This is the state. And we're, as we said, right at that state. I suppose the mean is the comparative analysis, but again, it doesn't do us satisfaction to think about being at the mean is where we want to be. That's it.
Does the board have any questions for the high school principal? Dr. Ross will present the other
What I'm
result.
hoping is that we could invite the champion Lakes Region math team here for recognition to the board. This is the second year in a row that they have won that championship. And although, yes, anomalies do exist, kids don't measure themselves in terms of that. And so when you're given a goal, when you strive to reach it, when you do reach it with distinction, I think that'd be a good thing to recognize. Thank you.
And again, Eric Chase is our data guru. He puts together some great slideshows, and he wanted to be here, but I told him to stay home and heal. So these are the elementary and middle school results, and these are, the reason we group these separate from the high school is it kind of gets confusing when we go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then there's a gap, and the 11th grade test is a different test, and it's 3 years later. So this will show you some trends across time, and it'll show you how our kids have done compared, again, to the state. We didn't do the comparison across the 10 school districts. So Eric gave you some definitions. Whenever he says percents here, he's talking about the students that scored proficient or above. So that would be anybody with a level 3 or a level 4. We add those together. And then he separated out the regular education scores. SES stands for socioeconomically challenged students. And so those would be any students that receive free or reduced lunch, and no one knows this. This is all identified on a secret state identification, and so when the state does these statistics, teachers do not know which students are economically challenged. I mean, you know, unless the student or the parents have revealed that to the teacher, but this is all confidential information. These are the statistics we get from the state, and the state breaks these out. IEP means that the child has an individual education plan, and they are receive special education. And then mean scaled score, as Mike has said all along, that's the average of all the students that were tested in that group. AYP is adequate yearly progress. There is a benchmark that was set in 2002. No Child Left Behind said you have 12 years until 2014. And so we're going to say every 3 years we're going to set a threshold so that if you meet that threshold by 2014, 95% of your students, because they allow 5% for severely challenged special education students. So by the end 2014, all students will be proficient or above. So this is the year that they will move the benchmark. So they basically what they did was they chunked it in 3-year slots because it was a 12-year period, so over 4 times. So this is the year that they are going to move the benchmark up to 95%. And you'll see how close we were. So AYP, it's kind of a moving target. Just when we get the kids to the proficiency level of 91% last year, well, now it's 95%. So we don't know those results till April, but we try to predict where we might be. So our reading results. This year, this is by grade level. You can see across the bottom it goes grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7, and grade 8. And in all of these slides, Newfound will be the blue bar, and the red will be the state. So that you can see that Newfound with all grade levels except grade 6, which we give the test in October, so this is really testing the instruction in grade 5 for grade 6. Grade 6 was slightly below the state average, and Newfound performed above the state average in every other grade level this year. In math, again, is, I'm sorry, this is still reading, 2011, 12, oh, that was the percent proficient, I'm sorry. That these were the percent of kids that were proficient. So the mean scaled score, as you heard Mr. O'Malley talking about, when he said 1140, every grade level has the first number in their score is going to be the grade level. So a 340 would be a student who hit that 40%, that 40 number. That's considered proficient. A 440 would be the fourth grade number, a 540. So these are just given in the 30s and 40s. So you can see that our mean scaled score for Newfound, again, was just at or above, slightly above or slightly below the state in every grade level. And we're looking at 51, 49, 48, 50, 50, and 51. This is where he did the percent proficient for the students who have IEPs. And if you look at Newfound, again versus the state, you can see a tremendous jump. We worked really hard this year with the kids who have IEPs, and we showed some great success. The state has 35% of the students in grade 7 that are at proficient or above, and Newfound had 64% of the kids with IEPs. So we were really proud of the growth that they made in the middle school this year. The students who are receiving free and reduced lunch, again, we compared very favorably to the state. There's research that says that students who live in poverty may not have the same educational opportunities before they come to school or during school, so that's why the statistics, that's why we get Title I funding. Title I funding is targeted to students who have disadvantages. And again, we compared very favorably with the state. Eric calls this the gap analysis. Our focused monitoring all last year was to say, let's look at, if you separated out the kids, and I think that was a question somebody asked, and I'm sorry, Mike, that we didn't get that question to you soon enough. What would it look like if you took out all the kids who had IEPs? So the kids with separated out, not the total group. 93% of our students without IEPs in 3rd grade, 88% in 4th grade, 85% in 5th grade, 88% in 6th grade, 84% in 7th grade, and 93% in 8th grade are proficient or above. And again, you can see that with the IEPs, we had 36% in 3rd grade, 38% in 4th, 33% in 5th, 36% in 6th. Look at that decline in 7th. 64% of the kids with IEPs. We really narrowed the gap, and that is our goal. That was the whole goal of our focus monitoring team, is to say, what can we do to narrow the gap? So we only have a 20 percentage point gap in 7th grade now between the kids who have IEPs and who don't. And that's what we're trying to get, that kind of a real growth in every single grade level. And then it drops down again to 52 in 8th grade. Every grade level has different, one of the things I just want people to keep in mind is we talk about statistics and we talk about percentage of kids with IEPs. An IEP could be an individual education plan for a child who has a reading disability. It could be for a child who has a physical disability. It could be for someone with speech-language disability, for someone with autism, with someone with an emotional handicap. So when we look at the percentages of kids, we drill down and we say, who are the kids and what is their likelihood that we can help them to advance their reading by different methods. So some of them may be receiving intensive speech therapy, some may be receiving some extra outside tutoring through Title I, etc. So this is a comparison over 3 years. So you can see that we are making some really good progress from last year. 3rd grade, we're up 5 percentage points of the percent of kids who have scored proficient. We're up from 73% to 82% in grade 4, up just from 79 to 80 in grade 5. Grade 6, we dipped down a little bit. Huge growth from 66% last year in 7th grade up to 82% overall, and then from 78 to 86% in grade 8 this year. So we kind of like to look at the trends over time to see that, you know, any given year you might have a little dip here or there, but are we in general making progress over time? Then the math results, again, Newfound is above the state average for the percent of kids proficient and above, 82%, 81%, grade 3-4, we're 3 points below the state in grade 5. Grade 6, we're a couple of points below. Grade 7, we're above the state average, and then we dip down below in grade 8. Group of kids, we're going to show you the cohorts, how they compare different groups of kids. This time, if you look at the mean scale scores, we are exactly right at that state average all the way across. The IEP math, You can see different grade levels had varying degrees of success. Again, looking at the cohorts of kids who was in that group that year. But we, up and down depending on the grade level. These are the kids' socioeconomic status. Again, above the state all the way through, a little bit dip down below in the 8th grade group. The gap analysis. Where did we make some good progress? We have a really widening gap in grade 5 this year. What's that about? We're going to analyze that, look score by score, child by child, and see where we can narrow that gap. Again, you look at the 3-year trends, really doing a great job in grade 3, improvement in grade 4, slight decline in grade 5, decline in grade 6, a little bit up in grade 7, slight decline in grade 8. So the historical results is what we tried to do here is to say, let's look at how we're doing over time. So he's got several colors on this. Newfound, again, is going to be blue. The state of New Hampshire is red. And then he separated out the Newfound kids with IEPs are yellow. I'm not sure that'll show up well on the home screen. And then the green is the state of New Hampshire with the IEP. So we are trying to say, are we making some good progress? And again, there's that real nice bubble in the real nice jump in that IEP group that we had from 2009. It was up quite a bit, and then we dipped down, but we're climbing back up again. So this one across the bottom now goes from 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So this is a historical trend, and this is all for grade 3. So these are the kids who were in 2005. This is the same group. No, it's not. It's a different group every year. This is the one that's different. The next one will have the same group in the cohorts.
So this is all grade 3?
This is grade 3. So this is a different group of kids each year. I'm going to show you one with the same kids going through. Grade 4 reading over time. Again, a little bit up, a little bit down, not too many dips. Grade 5 historical grade reading from 2005 up through 2011. And what we try to do is we'll take these and we'll line them all up and we'll see where were the kids in grade 3 that have gone to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I mean 7 up 8 and then they don't test in 9, 10 and then they do in 11. Again, here's grade 6 trend in reading. Newfound versus the state. Grade 7. Remember we told you that this year we had a really nice jump in that yellow bar for kids with IEPs. We only had 9% of them proficient last year. Again, that's a different cohort of students. But this year, 64% of the kids with IEPs were found to be proficient or proficient with distinction. And then grade 8 reading, historical trend. We like it when we are above the state, and we are in grade 8 this year. So the historical results for math are similar. Again, just going through, this is all grade 3 math, grade 4 math, grade 5 math. We had a big dip in our special ed group this year. One of the things that occurred this year, we were analyzing why could this be in grade 5. What we had, No Child Left Behind says that parents have choice if a school is labeled as a school in need of improvement. So if a school does not make the adequate yearly progress bar in every single group and subgroup. So you have to make it as a whole school, you have to make it with just your IEP students, you have to make it with just your social economic students. If you don't make it in the same subgroup 2 years in a row, then you are labeled as a school in need of improvement. If you're labeled as a school in need of improvement for 2 years, then parents have choice to go to a different school. So we had 14 students choose to go to the Bridgewater Hebron School last year. And this year, Bridgewater Hebron's ranking dropped because those students hadn't been part of their program all the way through. And some of the students that were there moved to other schools. And so whatever their practice was that was supporting the kids for their test-taking strategies, we have to follow certain rules by the state, but different schools do it in different ways. They took the test in a couple different locations. And one of the things that I was talking to a couple of the elementary principals, they said, well, when we tested these students with IEPs, we had them in a special room with a one-on-one teacher. They only have 30 kids in a 5th grade or 14 kids in a 5th grade in one class. So when they're all together in another group, they don't necessarily have the same one-on-one in the same room at the same time. The kids only met the new teachers for the first 6 weeks of schools. And some students with IEPs have a long time that they need to get comfortable in a new setting and get used to new things. So we're trying to use a lot of hypotheses, say why might it be that the same kids that did really well the year before didn't do so well? And we're tracing them student by student, and as I said, some of them have moved into different locations. Never excuses, always we're analyzing every minute to say, what are we doing, what can we be doing better, and why might this happen? Again, this is grade 6 all the way through. We got those, some nice growth with those IEP kids. And it's grade 7 all the way through, grade 8 all the way through. Sometimes we have a very small population. One of the things that happens at our elementary schools is if there's only a couple of students at that grade level, 1 or 2 students can skew that percentage. So if you have 3 kids and 2 of them make proficiency, you have 67% proficient. It's a little bit misleading when we look at the percentages. So that's why we like to make sure we're looking at every single student. If you have a huge group of kids and there's 100 kids in a grade level, then 3 kids isn't going to make as much difference. 3 out of 100 is not going to make the same difference as 3 out of 4. So here's the cohorts. So from 2010 to 2011, you can see that the class of 2020, who are the current 4th graders, they performed the same as a whole group compared to the state of New Hampshire. And you can see that 27% of the same group in 2010 were proficient with IEPs, and this year we got that up to 38%. So these are the same kids. To me, this is the most important way to look at it, is the same kids. How are they doing? Current 4th grade, this is their math. And they went from 86% to 85%, but look at that growth from 40% of the IEP kids to 54% of the IEP kids district-wide in 4th grade. That's some great improvement in special ed. This is the class of 2019, so this is our 5th graders. And you can see that they made a nice improvement from 77% up to 85% overall. And they dropped quite a bit, going from their 3rd to 4th, and then they kind of leveled out. So they did really well in the 3rd grade, that particular group. Again, did different kids move in and out? We don't know exactly why. We're looking into that. This is our current 5th grade in math. Look at that dip in the special ed. We don't know why. We're looking into it. We're not happy with that. What are we doing different? What's not working? Current 6th graders. They've been pretty steady, pretty level across. And current 7th graders, again, something we did this year. And what we've done this year in math in the middle school, actually, is we've been team teaching with a special education teacher and a regular education math teacher. They are team teaching together in the class. They're not pulling the kids out and tutoring them somewhere else. We used to have a model where the 7th grade teacher, 6th grade teacher, 8th grade teacher in math would say, well, I'll take the kids with IEPs and I'll teach them over here. And now we have Mr. Donahue, who's a math teacher in the middle school, and he team teaches with each level, with Mrs. Chase in 6th grade, with Mrs. 7th grade, Mrs. Nelson, and with Mr. DeVarney in 8th grade. So now we have some real good consistency. We have that team teaching. That approach seems to be working well at the middle school level. These are the current 7th graders in math. I'm sorry, that was the reading one. And then they have the Read 180 lab. So Mr. Why am I going blank? I'm sorry. Dudek, thank you. He pulls 15 students per grade level out, and he does intensive reading with them every day. So that has really made a nice difference for this group. Okay, in the 8th grade, you can see again we've got some nice improvement. 93% of our 8th graders are reading proficient and above, and 52% of our kids who have IEPs are this year reading proficient or above. Math. And again, we typically see that as they get through the middle school, they get less and less excited about taking the test. We don't know how much is their skill level, We don't, but we also have a whole thing with Northwest Evaluation Test, and that's given as a computer adaptive test twice a year. So this is the one test, it's the kneecap. And this is the test that's been used on the district data comparison test. Eric also has other data on the test that we give that's computer adaptive, and we give that 3 times a year. And we're doing some comparison. And we like to look at multiple measures of data to say, is a kid taking the kneecap test saying, oh, this is just a state test, and do I really care about this anyway? Are they really doing better? I mean, they can't fake doing better, but are they, if they're not doing as well, are they really putting their effort into it, and what are we doing to motivate them? So that is our kneecap. And basically, it's just a presentation. We'll have analysis in April when we get the AYP results. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you for your time and attention. I know that was a lot of data, but it just came out, and we think it's important to share that when we get it.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. In your packet, you had the minutes of the January 18th Professional Development Committee. You also had the minutes of the January 30th Policy Committee. We had to reschedule a couple of times because of ice. You have 2 sets of minutes from the School Budget Committee, January 3rd and January 11th. The January 11th was immediately following the budget hearing. Okay, we are now at the time in our agenda where we would like to hear from the public about any comments on the agenda items. And I ask that you be recognized by the chair and that you identify yourself and your town, please. Right. Todd?
Todd Westfall, Alexandria. I hope Mr. O'Malley didn't leave yet, because I have comments about his presentation.
Do you want me to
Mr.
grab
O'Malley,
it? He
leave?
did, but I can grab it.
Do you want to wait till he comes back?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else would like to speak about agenda items? Ms. Cody?
Janet Cody from Bristol. The 2 presentations that we saw are about kneecap tonight. Will those be put up on the board site?
They usually are, but the scores, the presentations you saw that the audience saw tonight on the test scores, those are usually put up on the website or not put up on the website? That's what Ms. Cody would like to know.
We can put the presentations that we just gave as,
Thank
we
you.
can post those to the website.
You're welcome. Mr. Westfall has a question.
Sure.
So last year, we heard the same presentation that was given by Eric Chase, and I think he did a good job explaining how we have bumps in the overall graphs from year to year, and a lot of that has to do with cohorts. And what, for the general public, what that means is classes, grades. For instance, my daughter would have been would be a senior if she weren't homeschooled. She would have been in that 11th grade last year, which was down dramatically. And it was explained last year that that drop was due to that class of cohorts, not performing well through their entire, career at Newfound. That's part of the reason why my daughter was homeschooled, to be quite honest with you. But my concern is that, what was presented to the public here tonight was that this increase that we saw this year was due to, something that the school is doing. And I'm not saying that a part of that might not be true, but I wonder if you would be willing to guarantee the same results or better results for next year. And I doubt you'd be able to do that because of the fluctuation that we see from year to year. And what I'd like to see, and I, just a personal observation, it seemed like there was a lot of glossing over the low points and a lot of highlighting the high points. And I think we should all, be happy when we're doing well, but we should also, you did point out some of the issues that, areas where you really need to focus. I think your challenges are greater in the high school because you're only looking at one grade through the whole thing. So it's much more difficult. But what I'd like to see is what's the total for the entire district? Because I think that's what you see with the task force, looking at overall, because we do have those highs and lows, and they're all over the place. You know, for us to look at that and get any clear picture of how well we're doing. I mean, personally, it looks like overall we're making improvements, but unless we look at the overall scores for the whole district, how can we tell, and do we have that data?
When we get the AYP results, they're given to us overall as an elementary grade, a middle school grade, and a high school grade. So what Mike showed you is all you're ever going to get. That's the overall 11th grade. And so when it gets reported out, did you make AYP as, and they'll do it by the grade levels that we gave you, added together all the 3rd grades, all the 4th grades, all the 5th grades from all of our elementary schools. The middle school is all together in one school, so those middle school scores are all the grade level scores. And then when the state does their AYP calculations, they will combine the 3 through 5, and they'll combine the 6 through 8, and the 11th grade will stand on its own because it won't get added. It makes no sense to add in an 11th grade score with a 3rd grade score.
Yeah, is that what was on the district task force?
How did
data?
they do that? How did you
I missed it.
when you did a number on the data task force, what did you do to come up with that number? What did you combine?
A
Did you
number
just-
for performance?
Yeah.
We took it off the New Hampshire Department of Education website, exactly as reported by them. I didn't manipulate.
But what was that number representing? Was that percent proficient district-wide? Was that mean scale score district-wide?
For the category, high school, elementary, and
It was by level, right?
That's correct.
Right. It wasn't just like one whole district.
Oh, no, it was for those 3 segments.
Right.
We did combine, they were broken out for grades and the lower grades, and we combined them as a group. Otherwise, it didn't come
One thing that matters when you're making combinations like that across the levels, not so much in the elementary to middle because they're using the same kneecap process and pretty much the same test. That test is totally recalibrated when you go to the high school level. The way you can tell how well each level is doing in relation to that calibration is to look at not the mean scale score, but the AYP index. The index score is the indication of how well that cohort is doing compared to apples, 11th grade to 11th grade. The AYP index score for satisfaction in making AYP, for example, at the 11th grade math is only 64%. And if you are scoring at that level, you are making AYP. For the 8th grade test, it's now up to 88%. So why the difference in almost 25 points of the benchmark, where 1 is so much lower and suitable? It's because of the indexing and the degree of difficulty of that test. So you really have to use the index scores to compare 11th to 11th. If you're using the raw math and you're taking 11 and then 3 through 8, you're getting a real distortion when you jump that level into the 9th grade, into the high school testing, because it's a different AYP index.
We could say the percent proficient grades 3 through 8 plus 11. We can add up the total number of percents proficient. The index score, basically what they do, we like the index score. The state has developed a complicated system, but it makes a lot of sense because the index score says you only get the same number of points for someone who scores a level 3 and a level 4. Basically, if you hit that proficiency level, you're going to get the top number that you can get on the index. But then they give you partial credit for kids who moved up from the lower half of level 2 to the upper half of level 2, and they give you some partial proficiency for the top half of level 1. So they basically give the schools credit for saying, your kids aren't there yet, but you used to be here and now you're here, and you made that much movement. So when we get the index scores, those are easy to add together because they come all out to be a number.
The index score accounts for every student
Right.
who was scored.
Right.
And it accounts for each of their scores in relation to the index.
Right.
So the better the score, the higher index value. But it counts all the kids for that index score. So it's not accurate to say proficient and above, because that probably, if you have sufficient numbers in those categories, will help you make AYP. but you can have very low numbers in distinction, you can have an ordinary number in proficient, but if you have 50% of your kids at partially proficient at a score individually, one question away, a right answer away from being in the proficient, that's how they calculate whether or not you're going to make AYP, by using that partially proficient category. I just wanted to talk about the cohort group because you mentioned it. It's meaningful. Cohorts matter. But they shouldn't matter enough to make the difference in scores. You will see differences in kids in groups because of how they're constructed and who they are. But what we want to see is to have it matter minimally. Maybe fluctuations across cohorts, but the growth to be predominantly in an upward trend, and for that difference in cohort not to make a difference in suitability for AYP or anything else.
And so for our programmatic changes, we're definitely saying, as I said, in the middle school, now we're team teaching. One of the things we discovered was when kids were below level in math and they had math difficulty, we would take them out and keep working on their skills, their basic skills. And they were missing the rich vocabulary that was going to show up on this test in 11th grade. They weren't getting the concepts and the vocabulary. So now we are doing very different kinds of programmatic changes. So we're teaching them in the same class with everybody else that's going to take that test, and then giving them extra remediation to bump up the skills. And Mike has a math lab right behind you where some of his math teachers on their off periods or during their study time, instead of taking a duty in a study hall, they are tutoring students. The students are going into a regular algebra class, and then they are going to get that extra tutoring. So they get that vocabulary, they get the math concepts, and it's kind of hard to pass a test when you see a word and you haven't heard that in your tutoring, because we've been catching you up on some computational kinds of tutoring or things like that.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Westphal?
Well, somewhat. It was a little confusing what Mr. O'Malley said, because looking at the graph that you showed for year after year, what you're trying to achieve is a more, it sounds like a more level, maybe a steady increase. But what we had in 2008, we were down. In 2009, we were up. In 2010, we were way down. In 2011, now we're way up. So, I mean, we actually see more amplitude in, so we're not seeing the leveling out from one grade to the next, and that's my concern.
Yeah, and
maybe overall, if you drew a straight line, you'd see an overall increase, but there's a lot of fluctuation.
Yeah, we have to stop the fluctuation. The consistency would be found in a strategy about program. What programs are the kids in? What readiness do they have for each level? And are they moving with that growth into levels of grade level?
Could you speak specifically about programs that maybe did influence the 11th grade in math and reading this year that might have attributed to some of that increase?
Yeah, one of the things, we 3 years ago, and I think that the writing scores that are improving are related to the improvement in reading scores. 3 years ago, we opened a writing lab. And the way we did that is to have English teachers condense 5 periods of teaching times, say, 15 to 20 kids per period into 4, so that they enlarge their class size, and then use their 5th period to have an HQT, an English teacher, in the writing lab, 7 periods a day. So our students can go there and work with them tutorially or in small groups on their writing skills. And of course, they have to be doing the reading in combination to be there. And they're accessing that, and over the last 3 years, I think that's making a very big difference. Hopefully we'll have that 55% who are proficient at reading move a substantial number of at writing into the proficient with distinction, and move the middle up to that proficient level. And correspondingly, the reading should follow. That's one thing that we've done. We also,
in the middle school, where we got that big jump in 7th and 8th grade in reading, is we trained some of our middle school regular education teachers in some of the special education reading programs. So we sent them to Wilson Reading Training. We sent them to learn how to do just words. So we now have an 8th grade teacher who's now taking the special education training on some of the reading remediation, and we're finding out that makes a huge difference. If we continue to improve the quality of what our regular education teachers understand about special education, we don't have to have so much division, like, well, you're a regular ed kid, you're a special ed kid. Now, if all of our teachers have more training, they're going to be able to spot a deficiency sooner, and they're going to be able to have a strategy to meet that. Teacher training programs never did that. They just trained you to go learn how to teach English Lit in the 8th grade. They never taught you how to teach beginning reading and how to sound out phonics, and then if you were an 8th grade teacher. So I really commend the fact that our teachers have taken it upon themselves to go and get this extra training. And also at the high school as well, we have some of Mike's staff that are taking some training with Dr. Carol Tolman, who's our consultant for our District in Need of Improvement Plan for Reading.
Mr. Franklin?
I'm Franklin Hebron. You track individual classes up through the 8th grade, and you add that tracking at the 11th grade to that tracking, so you can see.
We only test
their
once
progress.
at the high school level in 11th grade.
Right, but you didn't show that 11th grade attached to.
Compared to how they tested in 8th grade?
No,
Yeah.
up through, well, you did what, 3rd through 8th?
We didn't do the cohort.
Yeah,
Right,
the
from
cohort,
11th,
add the 11th grade on it, then you could see all your testing.
Well, again, we apologize that, Mike and Eric would have compared their shows this morning if Eric weren't, injured.
No,
And
it's
we would have had.
Probably something you can do.
Yeah, we can do that.
would
We
be
can.
nice
Yep.
To be able to track that.
Yep.
Are there, Mr. Favorite?
Steve Favorite, Bristol. Now that roughly 10 states have worked through their governor to be removed from the No Child Left Behind program, has New Hampshire approached our governor and/or our educational system as to where we will apply to get off No Child Left Behind? And have we thought about our 5-year plan of where we're going to go without having this No Child Left Behind testing?
I'm glad you asked that question. I just met on Friday morning with Senator Jeannie Forrester, and she asked the very same question. There was a group
Exactly. She's done a
of
public
superintendents.
radio.
The waiver that the 10 states were granted, we looked into the waiver. And the waiver, when you apply to the federal government, the constraints around the strings attached to the waiver were more stringent than the No Child Left Behind sanctions. So I commend our commissioner for taking it slow and easy and not jumping ahead. So I believe what we've applied for is a year to study and to see the implications of what that waiver would really mean, rather than rushing ahead with that. I think some of the people that jumped on board very early with the race to the top states, they're finding out now that what they thought was going to come down the pike didn't play out the same way that they anticipated, and some of the states are being asked to return some money. So we're being cautious, and again, I commend Dr. Berry because she's being very cautious about that. And it doesn't look like a real good idea to jump ahead with the waiver, because in order to qualify for the waiver, you have to promise so many things that end up tying your hands even more than some of the No Child Left Behind rules. So that's where it is right now. We're not one of the states that went ahead with that, and I think for very good reason.
To that
Anyone
point,
else?
if I may? To that question, if I may?
Anyone else in the public, and then Mr. McGlory, and then Mr. Leoto? Fred?
Fred Robinson from Danbury. We had just heard someone, Mr. Westfall, ask for a possible guarantee on the continued improvement in these scores. But at this time, I think that would be rather difficult, because this is going to be a period of very vast experimentation that's going to be happening into the schools because of the significant staffing cuts that we will be seeing coming up. The same staff that have helped to raise these scores are going to be decimated. So I think to try and ask for a guarantee, and I know Mr. Westfall realized that it would be kind of hard to get a guarantee like that, but we're going to have to try and see what happens in the future as far as these scores, okay? So I guess that was just basically what my comment is. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Migliori.
Yes, two comments. The first has to do with one of the resolutions that was passed at the delegate assembly. It's in my report, but I'd like to share it with the public regarding this topic. One of the issues that apparently is a logistical concern is that testing isn't done consistently on NECAP. And the Stratford School Board, on behalf of all the school districts in New Hampshire, wanted to petition to change the date of the NECAP state testing from October to a testing date late in May, which is done for science, for example. And it made just logical sense to do that because the tests are conducted, 3 or 4 weeks after the kids get to school in the 8th grade, and they're really not 8th graders yet. They are in May, having had benefit of that. And it really, and this was, by the way, not recommended by the Board of Governors for the School Board Association. But the delegates voted to pass it. And the reason was the justification for doing the scoring the way it was had to do with the economic convenience of the testing companies that had staffing available in the fall, not in May. So it kind of ticked everybody off, and we took care of that. So that is an issue. The other thing that was extensively discussed is No Child Left Behind, 10-year anniversary this year. And the law is very extensive, and if it were left untouched, 100% of the schools in the country will be schools in need of improvement very quickly. So the House and Senate, in its wisdom, has come up with some legislation to, rather than fix the law, provide for additional waivers, similar to what Dr. Ross alluded to, except these waivers are kind of rules that will be promulgated to not have the penalties that states that would have to otherwise adopt them administratively would have to go through. And it's kind of a recognition that No Child Left Behind is not working the way it's supposed to, but politically nobody wants to do anything about it, so they're coming up with a way around it. And the conclusion is that nothing's going to happen prior to the election, and that most of this work will in fact get done by the lame duck Congress after the first week in November of this year to deal with the issue. And it may simplify the waiver side of things. One of the conditions is to be able to exclude special ed students from the testing so that your results will look better. So there are things like that being addressed from a congressional point of view, and I just wanted to share that.
Mr. Leo?
With respect to Mr. Favorite's comments, I add to what Vincent just said. There are no states, as far as I know, that have essentially dropped the program. They've applied for waivers, which are poorly defined extensions in time with poorly defined criteria around them. One of those criteria, as described by the New Hampshire Department of Education director today to NPR, required that the state take over or define the criteria for evaluation and competency away from the local school districts in order to be granted a waiver. My takeaway from her comments was that didn't sound like it would fly real well in the state, and she was very anxious to try and put together a program that would fly, and so therefore deferred the application for at least a year. And my personal opinion is that was a very smart thing to do. The second thing I wanted to say, just in general about the presentation, which both parts I thoroughly appreciate, is that the Data Task Force will do a couple of things in recognition of this. Sharpen some of the terms and data that we use to be more specific around performance, to particularly what kind of performance metrics we have and so forth. And the other thing is to ask questions, which I know are already being asked at the district level. Ask questions like, when we implemented Program X in reading or in math, what happened to that cohort of students, or the cohort of students that was exposed to that program for its entire educational experience? Were they better? Were they worse? That's not something that drops out of state numbers. It's only local information, but it's very important to help us decide, did this intervention pay off or did it not?
Right. Good point. Thank you.
We have another one.
Just to Vincent Paul's last remark about kneecap, in relation to when the testing occurs, 2012, 2013, this fall, October, end of September, and next year will be the last kneecap test. And then the following year will be the first Common Core assessment. And when we do the Common Core assessment in 3 years, we've been told the testing will swing to spring, to April or May.
One of the other reasons that that our state decided to do it in the fall, and I don't doubt that economics was at the base of it, was that when kids take the test in May, because of the length of time it takes for all the psychometricians to figure out what the scores mean, we weren't getting the results back until the next fall. So a teacher would not even have the same group of kids in front of her anymore to say, okay, I know who you are, I know what your score was. Now teachers this year know, because they know which kids got which scores, and they have the rest of this year to try to remediate those things. So that was another reason. But Mike's right, there's going to be a year where, like, next year will be the last kneecap, then there's going to be almost like a year, because it's going to swing, and it's going to be a computer adaptive test, which is very similar to the NWEA test that we get. So as a student continues to get more and more questions correct, the test will become more difficult. As a student gets more and more questions incorrect, the test will become easier. So if a child is not able to read on grade level, and we give him a math test on 4th grade level, and he can't read that math test, he's going to get a lot of those wrong. If this computer adaptive test finds his actual level, then we can find out what he really knows about math. So we're really looking forward to, they're calling it the smarter balanced approach for assessment, and we're really looking forward to that. So.
Thank you. We're going to go into our discussion items now, and there will be another public comment time on the agenda before we have any motions or take any actions. Excuse me, under discussion items, you have 3 policies for first reading. 2 of them you've seen before, and you've recommitted them to the policy committee. The first one is evaluation of personnel, and the second sentence in the policy has been changed. I think it was Mr. Lieto pointed out the last time that the second sentence in the other version seemed to contradict the first sentence, and he was right. So we changed it to say that, see the collective bargaining agreement, because we do have a section in the collective bargaining agreement about teacher evaluation. The awarding of diplomas